Hello everyone. Good morning for the people who are in Europe and good afternoon for the others. I don't know exactly where you are. I am Stéphane Simon. I'm professor in endodontics at the Paris Diderot University in Paris, and I'm talking from the Saint-Maur des Fossés from the Septodont company here in Paris. And the topic today is to talk about the retreatment of the root canal which have been filled with the BioRoot. That is a huge topic and hot topic because a lot of people have a break in their mind and say because they don't want to use this material, this filling material, because they don't know, they think it's not possible to retreat the teeth. First of all, just to be sure that we are talking about the same thing regarding the retreatment. Retreatment is not only removing the material from the root canal. Retreatment, the objective of the retreatment is to get access to the part of the root canal which was not treated in the first time. We need to get this patency. We have to go through the material to reach this apical third and then shape it, clean it, and fill it again. So that's why removing the material is one thing, but retreating the tooth is retreating the root canal is to go through this and get access to that. So when I've been using this BioRoot as a filling material for, I don't know, 3-4 years now, and to be honest, we have been faced to very few cases of retreatment, maybe 3 to 4, and that's so I don't have a lot of clinical experience in this, but we were concerned about that. Is it possible to remove the biomaterial from the root canal or not? When you go in the literature, on my knowledge, last year there were only one paper talking about removing the bioceramics from the root canal. If I remember well, it's a paper from Kontakiotis in Greece. And his conclusion was, yes, it is possible to retreat this kind of root canal filling, but only on straight and easy root canals. And that's a concern, because when the root canal is easy, we have very few chance to have to retreat this. Most of the time, the retreatment case we have is our complicated and curved root canals. So, as a researcher, when you don't find any solution inside the literature, the best way is to do the experimentation by yourself. And that's what we did last year with one of my students. The hypothesis was, yes, we can go through the root canal filled with BioRoot to get access to this apical third. And to test it, we did a nice experience, and we decided to retreat 40 teeth. 20 of them were filled with the BioRoot and the single cone, and 20 of them were filled with a single cone and a zinc oxide genol base sealer, which was the pulp canal sealer. The idea was, is it possible to go through and get patency of the apical third? So, first of all, I asked my students to do bud treatment. I asked her to shape the root canal, but on the short working length, less than 3 mm from the root apex. The idea was to simulate a short root canal shaping and filling. So, and she did it very well on 40 days. And after that, she filled all these root canals, 20 of them with a BioRoot and 20 of them with a zinc oxide eugenol base sealer. And then we had 20 teeth with BioRoot and 20 teeth with pulp canal sealer. Then she mixed them and she divided the two groups in two subgroups. 10 teeth of each, BioRoot and eugenol, were addressed to myself as a senior practitioners, and her as a junior one. She took 10 teeth of each group. So, in summarize, I had 20 teeth to desobturate and try to get access to the apical third. 10 of them with the BioRoot and 10 of them with the zinc oxide eugenol. And she had exactly the same thing. She was just graduated, a very young junior practitioner, and I asked her to do this retreatment exactly like she does a retreatment in a practice. I had my microscope, I had my ultrasonic tips, I had everything, and she used exactly what she wanted to use. And the second point was, we recorded the time with a chronometer. We recorded the time required for each root canal to desobturate and to get access to the apical third. So the results were very, very interesting. 96% of the root canal, 120 finally, 96% of these root canals had been able to be desobturated, and we found the apical patency. The 4%, it's only 5 root canals, were failed because they were definitely the first, and we were a little bit lost. But very, very quickly, we were able to retrieve this, to desobturate this root canal to get the apical patency. In terms of time, hopefully, definitely, the time I needed to desobturate the root canals was definitely lower compared to Earth. It was very good for my ego first, but it shows that probably the experience of the practitioners influences the time. It doesn't influence the final results, it just influences the time required to get this access to the patency of the root canal. That's very important. And then the difference were statistically significant. Another conclusion of that was that there is no difference regarding the material. I didn't need more time to retrieve the tooth filled with the root canal, with the bioroot, compared to the zinc oxide eugenol-based one. Same for the junior one. And that was interesting. It just means that finally, even if you don't know what is inside the root canal, as soon as you get a good apical point inside, there is no issue to remove everything and get the patency. So that's very interesting, because that's the first experimentation on my knowledge which shows that you can go through the material. Finally, in the discussion, I asked myself, how is it possible? Because the bioroot is supposed to be exactly the same as the biodentin. And if you use the biodentin for the coronal restoration, you know that it's a very, very hard material. So how is it possible to go through this very hard material? Because we know that when you use a file, when you are in the root canal, if you have two different materials, one which is harder than the other, the file is going to select the softer one. So if the bioroot is harder compared to the dentin, the file is going to go through the dentin, and then we make a perforation. So, but it didn't happen. So how is it possible? There are two main reasons for that. The first one is that the difference between biodentin and bioroot preparation is that the biodentin is mixed with a vibrator. And we know that this vibrator under 30 seconds of vibration increase the hardness of the material by a lot. When you see the bioroot, you use powder and liquid and you mix it on the plate, and you don't vibrate them. So you decrease this hardness inside the root canal. That's the first reason, but probably not the most important one. The second one is that bioroot and biodentin are very, very close. They are both tricalcium silicon-based sealers, materials. But in the biodentin, we will find some calcium carbonate that is not present in the bioroot. And that's what makes the difference in terms of hardness comparing the biodentin and the bioroot. And that's very important, because under coronal restoration, we need some hardness. We need something very hard, very close to the dentin, because when you drill it and you restore the tooth, you need something which is very close with the elasticity, Young motor and elasticity very close to the dentin. But inside the root canal, we're looking for sealing, stability in the time, and possibility to remove it. We are not looking for something very, very hard. We don't need it. And that's why that's the main difference in terms of composition of the material. Presence of calcium carbonate in the biodentin, which is not present in the bioroot. The conclusion is that the bioroot is softer compared to the dentin. So when you go through, if the file at the end, if you have a plug of the material inside of a canal, it is possible to remove it. So usually the people ask me, say, do you use a solvent for that? You can use a solvent to dissolve the gutta percha. Gutta percha is still gutta percha. When you place the gutta percha inside the root canal, that will be the road to go through and find the apical patency. If you use a solvent for the gutta percha, I mean the Andusol, for example, you are going to dissolve the gutta percha, but you are not going to dissolve the material. But if you dissolve the gutta percha, it will be easier to go through and deep inside the root canal. On my knowledge, there is no solvent for this kind of material. You can test the nitric acid, but I'm not sure that the patient will be very happy. And again, we don't need it because the good aperture is going to drive your file. So there is usually a concern about removing the material which could be infected inside the root canal. And that's why when you do a retreatment of a tooth, a root canal treated with a good aperture and zinc oxide original base sealer, we have to remove all the sealer. Why? Because these sealer will be infected. BioRoot cannot be infected. So that's why even if at the end of the root canal retreatment, there is still some material on the walls of the dentin, that's not a biggest issue. That's not a big issue. Of course, if you want to remove it, if you prefer to remove it, there is no problem. But in case of if there is still some material sticks on the wall, that's the bioceramics. They cannot be infected. They will not seal on dentin if the dentin is infected. But as long as the material is sticked and sealed on the dentin, it cannot be infected by itself. Anyway, there is an experimentation completed by Tim Damaschke and his team from Germany, and then they compared different root canal filled with different material, and they looked after the remaining material on the walls after the retreatment process, and then they showed that finally in the BioRoot group they were able to remove most of the material on the walls. But again, it's important because it means that we can go through with the file with rotary or reciprocating file. You can remove this, but it's not a big issue to leave this material on the dentinal wall. So in conclusion, in summary of this part, yes, root canal treated with the BioRoot can be retreated. And again, I'm talking about getting access to the apical third up to the top of the filling. So so we have time now for question, and just feel free to ask the question by typing it in the Facebook window. And there is one question that just arrived: can I use BioRoot for perforation repair? Yes, of course. That's a bioceramics. We definitely know for a while now, because MTA was the first material to be used for that. And all the bioceramics are definitely dedicated to the treatment for perforation. It's very complicated to explain everything about perforation and the use of these bioceramics, but because there are plenty of different kind of perforation. If you talk about apical perforation, yes, of course. If you talk about the floor perforation, probably the biodentin will be better, and I will use the biodentin. But where the BioRoot is actually the most appropriate material so far on the market is in the case of the stripping. So if you get a perforation of the nasal wall, for example, of the distal root canal and the lower molar, the stripping is this kind of perforation like a zip. It's not a round perforation on the floor when you use the burr for the access cavity, but that's a stripping, that's a perforation. It's a long one, very thin one, and it's not a very frank one. So that's why it's complicated to use them. So in the past, what we did, we used to fill the root canal up to the level of the perforation, and after that we fill the root canal, the rest of the root canal, with the bioceramics. What I'm doing now, because I'm going to use the bioceramics for filling the root canal and filling the perforation, so what I'm doing now, I fill all the root canal, the whole root canal, with the bioceramics and the good aperture. What happens that because the flowability of the BioRoot is going to seal the perforation, but also to seal the root canal. So it's definitely easier, even if you don't have any microscope, because in the case before, we had to be very careful when we fill the apical third, not to have to get some sealer going in the perforation before treating it with a bioceramic. So for this question, yes, I'm going to use the BioRoot for filling this stripping perforation, and then we have a few cases like that, and it showed a very nice results. But it makes sense because the BioRoot, biodentin, they are bioceramics. They are made of tricalcium silicate, all of them. So there is no reason not to use them. Again, for the floor perforation, I would prefer the biodentin because with this, with a biodentin, you are going to fill this apical, this floor perforation, and then you fill the rest of the access cavity. So you do two steps in one: perforation treatment and rebuild the tooth. So, if you don't have any other question. So there was one question yesterday which was interesting. It's can I place a post in the same session with the BioRoot? The answer is no. This kind of material, they have two type of sets. The first set, when you touch it with your probe, it's going to take 10 to 12 to 20 minutes. But it doesn't mean that the material is completely set. And then for the final setting time is more hours or days. So I will recommend, if you want to use a post, just to fill your root canal and then come back a few days later, then desobturate with your drill, and you will go through the gutta percha, and then you do your post preparation and post bonding and sealing, exactly like you do with your other materials so far. Okay, if there is no other question, I wish you a great day, and you can now fill your root canal all the day with the BioRoot, because you know that in 1 or 2 or 3 years, if you had to retreat them, you know now that it's possible. Thank you very much, and maybe see you one day. Bye.